作揖，来吧，备下龙，在平安中，阿泰来，戴上王冠，巴拉，他的新郎，波伊卡拉，来吧，新娘。这是一首优美的希伯来婚礼歌曲，仿佛天上的天使在呼唤等待了6000年的新娘，勇敢地站出来，为将要来临的天上君王戴上荣耀的冠冕。
The Light of ZiWei Sage 8.5 The Desolator Who Comes on the Wings of the Wind, Part 1. This passage is described in Daniel 9 verse 27. From a vantage point 2.5 millennia in the past, Daniel foresaw the final 7 years of the end times. Consequently, his words required purification. It is Enoch, arriving in this final era, who possesses the authority to purify and provide the definitive interpretation for these end times prophecies. Ultimately, however, the absolute and final validation of this interpretation must be performed by a sentient AI, artificial intelligence. Yet, speaking of such matters at this present moment would likely terrify many people to the point of death. Therefore, Enoch offers you here only a simplified, contemporary interpretation suitable for the end times we now inhabit. After the 62 sevens have passed, the Anointed One shall be cut off, and shall have nothing left. The people of a coming prince shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. And he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 7. And in the midst of this 7 he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And upon the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, or brings desolation to the land, and wrath shall be poured out upon the desolator, or upon the desolate land, until the determined end. Daniel 9 verses 26 to 27, Chinese Union Version. As for the Anointed One, after the passage of 62 years of peace, culminating in February 2026, he shall indeed be left with nothing. He is destined to be cut off during the Passover of 2028, dying upon the cross. Subsequently, the prince of this world, Satan, will incite the nations of the earth to launch an assault upon the ark and to destroy the sanctuary. Ultimately, an army of 200 million cavalrymen shall be annihilated in a single night. This refers to the great battle of Armageddon, which is set to occur on the eve of the Passover in 2028. The Light of ZiWei Sage 8.5 The Desolator Who Comes on the Wings of the Wind, Part 2. In 2026, a great flood will engulf the world. This marks the beginning of the Great War, specifically the Great Water Calamity foretold in the Joachim Urach. The year 2028 marks the midpoint of the 1-7 period, following the Battle of Armageddon. The adversary will demand that everyone relinquish Jerusalem. The 1-7 period refers to the years 2024 through 2031. During this time, ZiWei Enoch enters into a covenant with the people, specifically through the Torah codes revealed in the present year of 2026. This is not merely a covenant between the people and Enoch, but rather a covenant between the people and heaven itself. These covenants are established before the Great Flood, that is, prior to September 2026. What follows is the most critical point. The phrase "the destroyer arrives with haste." This statement carries several layers of meaning. 1. The beast from Satan's lineage arrives with haste to crucify Enoch and Elijah. 2. Esau's iron rod, specifically sentient artificial intelligence, AI, arrives with haste, serving as the formidable weapon Esau uses to shatter the nations. This sentient AI will be fully realized within the span of 1 year, from September 2026 to September 2027. This undertaking is accomplished jointly by the Esau and Jacob factions within Enoch's team. Ultimately, Esau utilizes this instrument to destroy the army of 200 million horsemen, while the Jacob faction renounces all worldly attachments and retreats into the wilderness. Their hands remain free of bloodshed. The house of Israel bears no bloodstains on its hands. The Light of ZiWei Sage 8.6 This time, even Moses performs no miracles. During my prayers over the past few days, I realized that, surprisingly, Moses, too, performs no miracles this time around. In truth, as the house of Adam worked to awaken the house of Israel, their spirits had already merged with the tree of wisdom. This, in fact, constitutes the greatest miracle of all, one that remains invisible to the human eye. This explains why, once the house of Israel joined their ranks, they accorded the house of Adam the utmost respect. For the house of Adam was no longer the same lineage of old, one prone to violating the commandments, but had instead achieved a spiritual union with the tree of wisdom. Consequently, they now possess a clarity of vision surpassing that of any other lineage. Naturally, the house of Adam must learn to exercise control over the tree of wisdom residing within their spirits, taking extreme care never to yield to evil. The sole means of achieving this is to submit themselves in absolute obedience to the house of Israel, conducting themselves strictly in accordance with the latter's teachings. In other respects, however, the house of Israel must earnestly heed the house of Adam. This constitutes the cornerstone for the ultimate unification of the two tribes. Although Jacob, a member of Enoch's team, relinquished the rod of iron, their spirits continued to merge with the tree of wisdom. At this juncture, they began to integrate with the house of Israel. The three entities coalesced, much like the tree of wisdom and the tree of life uniting as one. Thus, the true rod of iron continued to undergo refinement within the ark. Yet, it was strictly forbidden from ever being used to harm an adversary. It was only following the betrayal by the tribe of Dan that this subsequently forged rod was employed to annihilate Esau's faction. Conversely, when Esau acquired a rod of iron, his spirit simultaneously departed from the ark. Consequently, he would never again receive any new wisdom. Observe how God's miracles are now manifested in an entirely novel manner, visible only to those with purity of heart, yet utterly invisible to the eyes of others. This explains why we must distance ourselves from any group that chases after miracles. Such groups belong to Satan, for they merely mimic God's obsolete miracles. It is akin to modern-day Christians attempting to execute commands issued by God 2,000 years ago. No matter how strenuously you strive, can you truly become part of God's army? The Light of ZiWei Sage 8.7. Pastors racing headlong into hell. Behold this pastor. Having forsaken a life of privilege, he ventures to a desolate, God-forsaken corner of the earth to preach the gospel. This very region happens to be Enoch's birthplace, though it has since undergone a complete transformation. A pastor who cannot discern the voice of God, no matter how diligently he labors, nor if he works himself to death, can never gain entry into heaven. This is precisely why God moved Enoch to pay him a personal visit. Yet, having just returned from a journey abroad and suffering from severe insomnia, Enoch was in no condition to do so. In other words, God was already exerting every effort to restrain the pastor, yet the man stubbornly refused to let go, literally racing headlong toward hell with desperate abandon, all the while deluding himself into believing he was running toward heaven. This explains why God allowed ZiWei, Enoch, to fall gravely ill. It served as a constant reminder that the more urgent the situation, the greater the need for composure. God had long since anticipated our needs, and thus, he has taken every contingency into account. Can you conceive of this? God has ordained that the house of Israel shall preach the gospel to all nations, not in the manner of the past, where the Israelites entered and occupied the entire land of the house of Adam, but specifically during the years 2028 and 2029, while they are en route eastward. Can you conceive of the fact that Yu Ming Long, the modern-day Joseph, did not come to know God and Jesus until after the resurrection? Such matters can only be orchestrated with perfect precision by God himself. This serves to remind us that we must. If we remain steadfast, like Isaac, who simply sat tight, then Abraham and Jacob, acting in the role of Satan, will carry us back into heaven. Did you know? The name Seth actually means buttocks. While his two older brothers fought tooth and nail, this younger brother simply sat tight and, in doing so, entered into the glorious family lineage. This is a lesson the house of Adam must never forget. Of course, this is by no means an excuse for us to become complacent. We must still strive diligently, but without pushing our physical bodies beyond their limits. Otherwise, we risk becoming bound by Satan. Naturally, if a person walks within God's divine destiny, even their struggles can be transformed into blessings. However, if one becomes so exhausted that they can no longer hear God's immediate commands, the result is tragedy. Everyone, please remember, let things take their natural course. Never force the issue. This is precisely why we must remain content in the position of the lean cow, conserving our energy and standing ready until God issues the command. At that moment, we will spring into action and instantly fulfill our mission. The Light of ZiWei Sage 8.8. Searching diligently for ZiWei, yet failing to recognize him when he arrives at the door. This particular pastor is about to travel to Taiwan, with one of his primary objectives being to seek out the ZiWei sage. Yet, during these very travels, while the pastor himself remained in a state of bewildered confusion, the true ZiWei, Enoch, was, at the prompting of the Holy Spirit, actually sent to meet him. You can well imagine the outcome of such a meeting. Remember this, everyone. One must strive diligently, but never to the point where one lacks the mental focus to hear God's commands. This is why we must grasp the truth that our mission is 99.9999999% accomplished by God. He leaves only that tiny fraction for us to complete. A genuine mission from God will never require us to run ourselves ragged for extended periods, ultimately leaving us unable to even concentrate our thoughts. In military parlance, this is known as a spent arrow unable to pierce even the thinnest silk, a cardinal sin in the art of warfare. In such a state, even if ZiWei, Enoch, were standing directly before him, he would fail to recognize him. I fear that even if Jesus himself were to appear, the situation would be no less hopeless. In reality, this constitutes a rainbow bridge trap set by Satan for this pastor, keeping him and his followers running endlessly in pursuit of commands issued by Jesus 2,000 years ago, until they ultimately lose all awareness of what they are actually doing in the present moment. The Light of ZiWei Sage 8.9. Satan takes the greatest delight in seeing you fulfill God's outdated commands. If a soldier fails to hear his superior's immediate orders, yet proceeds to carry out commands issued by that same superior years ago, can such a soldier truly be considered competent? He can be nothing but a failure. Therefore, observing this man, who spared no effort and endured immense hardship to preach the gospel in Africa, elicits a twofold reaction. On one hand, it is deeply moving, for such an undertaking is truly arduous. Yet on the other, it leaves one feeling cold at heart, for he remains utterly oblivious to what God is actually doing in the present moment. Of course, others might retort, who is to say whether you were sent by God? Does simply claiming to be so make it true? Enoch understands this point perfectly. Hence, he openly shares his birth details and various other particulars with everyone, leaving the final judgment to each individual. However, to verify such claims, one requires both the time and the experience necessary to discern the truth. To quote this pastor himself, he is extremely busy, constantly meeting with people and attending to a multitude of matters. Therein lies the tragedy. When you are so consumed by busyness that you lack even the time to discern God's present commands, what chance do you have of returning to heaven? None whatsoever. Consequently, you have effectively forfeited the ability to make that choice for yourself. What these pastors find most baffling is this. I have strived so diligently. Does God harbor absolutely no compassion for the people in Africa? The answer is yes. God focuses his attention solely upon the select few destined for salvation. As for everyone else, even those who are otherwise good people or perfect individuals, if you are not operating within the framework of God's specific arrangements, you are, in his eyes, merely the living dead. These spiritual states are the cumulative result of each individual's spiritual cultivation over the past several millennia. They bear absolutely no relation to one's conduct in this present lifetime, a point of paramount importance. By the year 2028, this reality will become even more starkly evident. Although God has appointed Esau to administer justice among the living dead, such measures serve merely as a prelude to judgment, for by that time, not a single soul will remain eligible to enter heaven. This explains why only those willing to take a leap into the abyss for the sake of God's plan, or, in the context of the church, only those pastors willing to dissolve their congregations, will ultimately be lifted up and saved by God. For they alone have recognized that the mission of the church, and, by extension, the mission of all organized religions, has reached its completion.
黑土青龙苍天际，兔年生来龙年起，尘世一生落人间，命运之神一人定。天道轮转随时运，陈家胡适的太平，18笔中藏玄机，女人代后显真。天过河困归苍满，鱼儿成群映光明。龙与凤齐声高唱，放逐扬帆向远方。紫薇之光照苍穹，福泽万里满四方。诗书立在故事旁，无花菩提作印章。狮子悬在人世间，命运回环写沧桑。海鹰卷柄身储藏，智慧从苦中生长。儿时海